My child, do you want to risk the consequences of having a collaborator as the next Kai if he is chosen and turns out to be guilty? The ramifications for Bareil would be catastrophic.
The surprises just keep on coming. A number of the quorum delegates have now shifted their support to the scientific genius, a man who was credited with saving the fleet on numerous occasions.
At this point, Jim, it is anyone's guess as to who's going to win.
Good day and welcome to BattleSpace 9. My name's Carl, and this is episode 12, featuring Deep Space Nine's The Collaborator and Battlestar Galactica's Colonial Day. Please welcome our guests from the Duras Sisters podcast, Rhianna and Ashlyn.
Hello! I've been a huge Star Trek fan pretty much most of my life. Started watching Star Trek with our dad pretty young, just reruns of TOS, and then it sort of expanded once the 2009 movie came out because we watched all the movies to prepare and just sort of dove in headfirst into Star Trek from there.
Rhianna and I, we both watched all of the Star Trek series in order. So we started with original series and then TNG, DS9. And so for me, DS9 is really dear to my heart because it's such a departure from everything that was done in the Next Generation and original series. I love that show. I think Rhianna's probably seen more episodes than I have because she rewatches it all the time. I love DS9. For Battlestar Galactica, I've never seen an episode besides the one that we watched for this episode, except I had a bridal shower, and one of my close friends, Sam, she gave me a beautiful picture signed by Terry Farrell that said happy wedding. And so that was one amazing gift she gave to me. The second thing she gave me was advice. She said, you have to watch Battlestar Galactica with your husband. And I was like, okay, sure. And so that was just a couple months ago. And so I feel like it was divine intervention to be asked on this pod today because perhaps this will open up my life to Battlestar.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm very glad it was the will of the prophets that you be on my show.
Absolutely. Yes. That's who I credit for sure.
You know, when I was looking for podcasters who might agree to do this, you were one of the first ones I considered, in part because kind of like what we're doing here, you're a Star Trek show based on theme.
Yeah, I was actually so psyched when I saw the premise of your show because I feel definitely a kindred spirit with our podcast. We don't go episode by episode. We choose themes for a series, and we just switch off, Ashlyn and I, choosing the series theme, and then we just go through every series of Star Trek, and then occasionally some movies if they fit the theme, and we'll just really do intensely deep dives. We did a family series that was so crazy and big and pretty much cover basically every Star Trek character's family and all of the drama and the triumphs and love and stuff that comes from it. And yeah, it's just really fun to explore Trek in a very particular way. And so that's what I was really seeing about your podcast that I liked a lot, getting to explore Battlestar and Deep Space Nine in such different ways than I would ever think to.
It's always interesting to take something you know really well from a slightly different point of view. What makes a good theme for you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, we have a Google Doc of maybe 30 themes that we want to do. The thing is you just keep getting ideas as you go. I think what's most important, especially because we cover series by series, so we actually have an episode devoted to family, all the family episodes in TOS, all the family episodes in TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, through all of them. And so for us, a really meaty theme comes if we can cover that theme in every single series. There's so many things to pick from. These shows are so rich in that it should be wonderful for you to be able to pick these shows apart.
We are kind of stuck on 2 series, but you go through 60 years of Star Trek. And it is such a wonderful thing that there is even a fandom that you can talk about a piece of television from 60 years ago and know that some people will know what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
incredible.
Yeah. And today is Star Trek Day. I have to throw it out,
Yes.
the day that we're
Yes.
recording, and it does really connect me to that. You know, like this show premiered, what are we at, like 55 years or something ago? Yeah, something.
1966.
Yeah.
I'm bad at math, even though I'm a Star
Same.
Trek fan.
Yeah,
Literally
same. So I'm just so impressed by the fandom and by how much Trek we have to cover. So yeah,
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's always more.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's something so special too about sci-fi as a genre. You know, I think it brings so many different types of people together, and I'm just so happy to get to talk about other sci-fi shows. We were recently on Where's Beverly podcast, where we we did a comparison of 2001: A Space Odyssey and the motion picture of Star Trek. So it was just like really fun.
Boy.
I'm really happy to like be on another show where we can talk more other sci-fi, because that's always fun to branch out. So yeah.
I'm definitely going to listen to that. I love 2001.
So good.
You know, like a lot of people, I kind of thought the motion picture was dull until I saw it in the Bareil Theater in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and they did that recut, that restoration.
Yes.
And like what I didn't realize is, you know, when you see that thing like on your TV when you're like 6 years old, it's underwhelming. You see it on a big screen, it works.
Yes.
Yes.
100% agreed.
The theme today is politics. We begin with Deep Space Nine's episode, The Collaborator. It's time to elect a new Kai, and the frontrunner is Kira's boyfriend, Vedic Bareil. But never underestimate Win Adami, who tears through the station, making transparent attempts to win support for her bid. Out of nowhere, Kubis Oak shows up, a Bajoran collaborator from the old days of the occupation government. He is persona non grata on Bajor, but now he is an old sad man and wants to go home. Kira says no, because he was a collaborator, so fuck him. But suddenly Win clears him on her own authority, because he has agreed to tell her the name of the traitor who gave the Cardassians information that led to an infamous massacre. It was Vedic Bareil. Desperate to clear Bareil's name, Kira goes through a bunch of old records, but finds that everything she needs has been classified by Vedic Bareil. She confronts him, he's not saying anything, and shortly afterward he withdraws from the race, leaving a clear path for Win. But Kira's still not buying it, so she looks through more records. Bareil is lying, because the person who really snitched was the most beloved figure on Bajor, Kai Opaka. Someone who means more to Bajor than to any one Kai, even to Opaka's successor, Kai Wynn. What did you think of this episode?
This is a classic, incredible Deep Space Nine episode. It's one of those that really tells you so much about the series. This is still, you know, it's season 2 we're talking about, but it's so clear that this is the show that they're setting up, you know. And I love these kind of episodes, similar to the one where Kai Wynn comes on the station and the school is blown up and there's that whole debacle, which they do mention in this one. I think that this is a like wonderful part 2 of this. It's so good. And what I think really makes Deep Space Nine shine is episodes like this that really get into the meat of the Bajoran occupation, the scars that people are dealing with far after the occupation, or not so far really. We aren't too far removed, but you can see how the scars shaped the position of the leaders here, and it's just so interesting to watch.
Yes, I love what you said, Rhianna. I also think that it's interesting to see how the Bajoran government is dealing with the selection of the new Kai so soon after the occupation, and it's interesting to see how much Deep Space Nine plays a role in that. I mean, we're even going to talk about things that have happened in the past during the occupation that did occur on Deep Space Nine. So I love this episode. I also love that it only really features Kira, Odo, Quark, Kai Wynn, and Vedic Bareil, very briefly Cisco, but I love that it's such a zoomed in episode on these really important characters.
That is one of my favorite parts of Deep Space Nine, which is there are episodes in it where the captain does not really play much of a role. And I don't think that's because of any kind of behind-the-scenes politics. I think it is just acknowledged that the Bajoran stories belong to Kira, right? I mean, who else would they belong to? If you are into 90s Trek, this is kind of the only series that deals with an alien culture this deeply. Yes. And even New Trek, I would submit, it's interested in that, but it kind of doesn't have the focus. It's very fast-paced, New Trek is. What we have in Bajor and Cardassia is quite unique. Focus groups said that the Bajoran politics episodes were like the least popular with the general public by far.
Wow.
Can't imagine.
That's like
But
all my
yeah.
favorite episodes. Yeah.
I know, right? Yeah. As you watch this, what kind of strikes you about this world of sort of Bajoran power and religious power?
So first of all, I just I can't help but think about the real world that we're in, living in America. I thought the scene where Vedic Kai goes to Cisco and requests a appearance with him so they can be seen together and have their pictures taken together. Cisco sees right through this and he says, sure, I'll appear with you after the election, but not before. And I couldn't help but think, because midterms are right around the corner for us in November, yes. And so many decisions are being made in politics right now. And so I thought it was really timely to be watching this. And Cisco knows. He's like, nope, we are not dealing with that right now. We're doing it later.
I think that Star Trek is always sort of the exception of shying away from, politics and talking about things that can be current issues or were issues in the past. And I think it's perfect that they're able to use a Bajoran lens so that it's maybe not like so Federation focused to what we're used to, but still has this viewpoint that we really want to know about with Kira. And I think the Kai Wynn, Vedic Bareil, like head-to-head stories are always so interesting. And this is another one that really shows their differences in their sort of politicking worlds, to see how Wynn is going to take every opportunity to manipulate or like be really sneaky. Like she's always checking records for something. Like she's always trying to find loopholes to make her on top, while Bareil is more like he leads with a gentler hand. And so it's really interesting to see them go head to head. And I always find these episodes really fascinating because, again, yeah, we're getting sort of a lens that isn't just Cisco and the other Starfleet officers. We're really seeing the politics here and how different they are from something we would see on in the Federation because of the religious aspect. And that's something I always really respected about like the whole Bajoran story, is that they were able to weave religion in so well without making it be this whole like, let's unpack what religion is, instead it was more just like, this is woven into the culture, and so it just goes hand in hand. And I just always find these kind of episodes fascinating, especially Kira and her focus in them, and how she is so determined to find the truth, even if it's gonna really hurt her and hurt Bareil's chances of winning and all of this stuff. So fascinating to see the character struggles in this too.
Yeah, I also really thought that we get to see an insight into Wynn in this episode, because I'm pretty positive that she orchestrated all of this. Like, I'm sure I was thinking throughout, like, that maybe she had brought Kublis on to the station at this time. Like, they had been talking about, or I don't know, somehow she knew this knowledge that he had information about this guy who was covering for someone about the, like, who really orchestrated this massacre. I also thought the, like, orb encounters that Bareil is having throughout this episode were really interesting, because that's how the show opens, is Bareil is seeing, like, he's seeing this guy being hanged, which is, of course, what really happened. And he sees visions of, like, Kira stabbing him, and Kira is just, like, weaving in and out of these visions with the orb. So I just thought, I don't know, like, obviously that's not really like real world, but I love to see how the religious aspect is playing into it and just how fascinating that culture is. And if I was Vedic Bareil, I would be glued to the orb every day. And like we don't see Wynn consult the orb at all. Like, she could have been, but we don't see that at all. So it shows me that, like you said, Rhianna, Vedic Bareil is all about the will of the prophets, and Vedic Wynn is all about herself.
If I had thought it was the will of the prophets that you should know of my trip in advance, I would have told you.
Yes.
Great, thanks, Wynn. Thanks.
And it's really fun to watch her go head to head with Cisco as well. I loved that entire scene where he's like, I'm seeing right through all of your bullshit, but like we can still, have this little pretend to be cordial thing going on, and that is Wynn's specialty. Like, she is very like Dolores Umbridge, like very sweet, sickly sweet almost on the outside, and just like, ooh, she's really got other agendas going on. Yeah.
For me, I love the verbal sparring with her and Kira, actually. And I love how they end this conversation that they have in the middle where they're kind of going back and forth, and Wynn assigns Kira, you are the one responsible for finding out the truth in this matter, which is so rude. Like, Kira doesn't even have to be involved in this, but but Wynn is bringing her into it. And then she ends the conversation by saying, you shall, like, if you know what's good for you, you will never talk to me with such disrespect again. Ooh. And, like, I hate her so much, you know, but also she's reminding us, like, yeah, she is, like, a really significant religious figure. And I just hate how, like, masterful she is in these situations.
She can play Kira like a fiddle. I am curious, like you, how much of this Wynn had planned in advance, because she was going to leave the station until Kira stopped her. And then she was like, all right, I guess the prophets have decided that you should have a role in my plan. Here we go. I would be curious to know whether she somehow planned that, like, I will irritate Kira enough that she will stop me. Because if you think about it, like, nobody is better to make this accusation against Bareil than his lover. I don't know how much she's a mastermind, and I don't know how much, like, fate is just kind of smiling on her in an evil way. But she is sharp.
I mean, the prophets, you know, question them all you want, but they do want her to be the Kai.
Yeah,
they
do, clearly.
Yeah. And something that convinced me that she was a part of it all along was right when Kublas, like, comes on the station, and, you know, all the Bajorans are surrounding him and calling him a traitor. That's when Vedic Wynn enters, and they actually look at each other and they share a look, and so that made me think this is totally orchestrated. If it was my first time watching this episode, I never would have noticed, but I just hate Kai Wynn so much. I was like, there's no way this is accidental, you know?
Yeah. I think too, like, that the orb encounters really play into this too. Like, Ashlyn, you were talking about how, like, yes, they aren't real life, but they truly are showing what's to come for Bareil. And I think the most telling part, because I'm such an English major, I love when we have, like, metaphors going on here, you know, and I love the idea of Kaiopaka and Beck giving him the box that's actually like a snake, you know, and then it turns into a noose. And I think that this is just such a significant moment in the episode to really show the audience, like, something is going on here with Bareil. He is having some, like, guilt surrounding the event of Beck's suicide and everything, and so it's really so cool to watch that unfold, like, through the orb encounters and whatnot. But yeah, I just love the way this episode's set up, because we're learning more as it goes along with Kira and everything.
Let's talk about the orb encounters a little bit, actually. How do you rank these in terms of, like, Star Trek sort of dream sequences or prophecy sequences?
I think that they hold a lot more weight than maybe, like, Data's, you know, little fantasies that he has when he's dreaming, or
I remember that.
Or, you know, maybe some, like, trippy TAS situation here. No, I think this is more grounded in, like, prophecy almost. And I think that there's so much to say about, like, the prophets being sort of like these like Greek prophets almost, where they're like, we're going to show you the future, but, like, by showing it, you're going to sort of make it happen for yourself. And I think that Bareil, by this all coming up with Kubis coming back on the station and his past coming back to haunt him about, you know, truly the noble deed he did for Kaiopaka, he was still, you know, the one to take the blame. And so I think that, like, the fact that the snake was the noose, you know, that they gave to him, he's the one who sort of hung himself in this situation. Like, because he was the one who dropped out of the race and sort of let Wynn become the Kai. I mean, that's also a very dangerous situation for Bajor to be in, but I think these orb encounters were kind of leading him to that.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting? I watched these episodes 2 or 3 times, and both times there were 2 parts of the dream that I forgot until I saw them again. One was the moment of Bareil making out with Kai Wynn. Like, oh, I forgot that happened.
Yeah.
Yep. Try to
And then I
block
forgot
that
it
out.
again.
Yep.
Probably on purpose.
The brain does not want to imprint
No.
that. Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
What does it mean when the gods send you a vision of making out with your enemy? I don't know. And the other one was at the very beginning, Kira's sort of weird experimental theater type outfit.
Yes.
Where she looks like she has a 60s bobbed hair and she's playing like... What was that?
That was wild.
I guarantee I've never seen that in any other Bajoran scene.
Yeah, I also, like, they play so many games on the holodeck and all these Star Trek shows, and I wasn't sure what game this was supposed to be. It reminded me of Wall Ball, which I used to play in like elementary school, you know, because she just keeps hitting the wall and it's bouncing, or hitting the ball and it keeps bouncing back, which maybe that's the point, is that she keeps like playing the same thing over and over. I'm not sure, but I was really struck by the beginning of this episode, especially because that's before the theme is just Bareil's encounter with that orb. Yeah.
It was really unsettling, and I think maybe too it's showing the like odd juxtaposition here of like Kira is sort of his like easy life and sort of the one he gets to just be in love with her, and when he's on the station he's kind of doesn't have to do all his, or can kind of put aside his Vedic duties for a moment, and then but the reality of what's like of his position is that he did lie for Opaka, and that Beck's suicide is sort of on him, he feels. And so maybe it's sort of a showing that like, yeah, Kira's being playful, and meanwhile like she's the one who cuts him down, you know, which is just like a whole other thing, which I think is again premising like, hey, that she's going to be the one to figure out your secret.
Yeah. And this made me realize something about orb experiences. When they had that scene where like Kira comes out and stabs him, and Opaka is in the background kind of comforting him, and then he wakes out of it, and then immediately then real Kira comes in and says, "Tell me it's not true." I sort of realized, you know, it's not necessarily about the content just of the experience, but it's about what happens during the time when you are getting it. Shortly after that is when he lies. You know, he's like, "No, I was the one. I couldn't allow that thing to happen." You know, Bareil as a character, I don't really get a lot of sense of his interior life or three-dimensionality, but I got one this time. And I was like, my God, he's doing it. And I see how he would come to that decision. So I really appreciated that scene.
It was so good, and I love the way that Kira says, like, this is a gift from the prophets, and then she stabs him, or something like that, you know? So that's, like, even bigger of, like, this is, the prophets are telling you that you should not win this election. Like, this is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of going back and forth, because I didn't fully remember this episode when I was rewatching it for this podcast. And I had a feeling, I was like, I don't think Bareil would cause the massacre, but when you're a character that's put in a situation of saying, I had nothing to do with the massacre, it just seems really suspicious, you know? Like, anytime in life, if you have to say that phrase, just be careful. But I thought that it was interesting, you know, despite their really close relationship, Bareil was not telling Kira about any of these visions. And I know that it's a very deeply personal thing, and he is, like, you know, very connected with the prophets. But I thought because they're visions about her, that maybe because they're lovers, they might discuss that. So I thought that was interesting, and it adds to the kind of mystery of the whodunit, you know, or who's responsible for this.
Yeah, she didn't tell about her visions of making out with him either earlier on, so I feel like they just don't communicate about those, like, deeply emotional things, which they need to, but they're both kind of stubborn in that way, emotionally, I think.
You know, it did occur to me watching the end of this episode, like, Kira uncravels the secret, basically confronts him directly with it in a public place, and, like, he doesn't look that moved, and I just think, you know, it's a little bit like Brad Pitt, like, in the 90s, used to get dinged for, like, instead of acting, he would just, like, stand and be handsome. And I feel like that happens with Vedic Bareil a lot.
Yes.
Totally.
And it's a shame, because that you know, the orb experience was great, but, like, he's been in, I don't know what that was, but I guess it was some sort of religious chamber. He's probably conceded to win at this point. And he comes out, and Kira's like, "Hi, you're lying to cover the only person who matters more to you than me." Kai Opaka. Can we discuss this later? Maybe in the car?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know. But this kind of fascinated me though, because what drives Kira to do this is like, this doesn't make sense. Bareil is too honorable to be acting like this, because this is basically a wild guess, and yet she presents it to him, and like she knows that his facial expression will tell her whether it's right, and that's pretty intense.
Yeah, she does not pull her punches when she's trying to suss out the truth, for sure.
No.
Well, and she's so good at reading people. I think once she comes to this conclusion, her first conclusion that it was him, it just doesn't fit. And she continues investigating with O'Brien. And yeah, I think the only conclusion is that it would really dishonor Kai Opaka's name for the truth to come out that it was like she sacrificed her own son for like probably thousands of other Bajorans. I mean, I think honestly, if the truth had truly come out, like for me, knowing the truth, I kind of admire her more for doing that. You know, like, yes, we lost 43 or 53 or whatever the number was, including her son, in this like horrible situation, but also it prevented a huge catastrophe. So I don't know if she deserves to be called the collaborator in this case, you know?
Yeah.
I agree with that. Like, you know, this episode is structured like so many of these. It's kind of structured to give Kira a comeuppance about like her black and white sense of morality. But I don't think it quite works on that field because of what you said. Like, if you compare Opaka to Kubis, by that point, Opaka was making a tactical decision. Like, and you have to do that all the time in the military, you know, 12,000 lives versus 43 lives. But when you compare it to Kubis, who was the Bajoran face of the occupation for years, it seems like on both these shows, collaboration is the worst crime you could do.
Yes.
And I agree with that, but I'm trying to figure out what that means. And I think part of it is like, I think everyone has to make some tough choices during a situation like that. But somebody like Kubis, like he enriched himself and he went above and beyond. And he pretended like all these massacres didn't happen.
I love when she just is able to like really tell people how it's like. This is really, she gets to do this a lot with either Cardassians or Bajoran collaborators. You know, there's so many opportunities for her to yell at them, and I love getting to see her just really put him in his place and say like, why would we allow you to step foot on Bajor again after what you did? And the fact that she was even like, I think that you're getting off easy by being exiled, you know? And she's not going to sugarcoat shit. Like, she is absolutely ready to tell you how she feels about you, especially to someone like Kubis.
I kind of wanted to know a little bit more about Kubis. He says things like, you know, I didn't really know what was happening. I just signed the papers and like, it's all good. A line that he says is, this was the established government at the time, was the Cardassians. And so it makes sense, like, to just work for them and to go along with it. And so then it makes me think about, like, you know, like during like Hitler's regime, people were like, oh, I'm just a secretary for the government. And then suddenly I'm a secretary for Hitler, you know? And
slippery slope.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. But yeah, the fact that he enriched himself, like, clearly that's not good. The fact that he knew what was happening is not good. And I actually was thinking about what Odo says in this episode, which is, I've noticed that when humans, no matter how good they are, in some circumstances, they can be led to do horrible things. And I think that line is setting us up for the reveal that it will be Opaka. Even in this situation with this guy, you know, he's just, yeah, sure, he just wants a job. And then he's like, oh, I'll just keep going with whatever the government is and kind of like shut out whatever's going on with all the murders.
Right.
Yeah.
To make the World War II comparison, this is what the Nuremberg trials were for.
Yep, exactly.
Presumably there was a process. Presumably there was a trial. He certainly doesn't strike me as very good. He doesn't strike me as super bad. I do look down on him, certainly. I mean, it's hard not to. They just sort of present a old, sad man. And Kira comes in and she reminds him of the old, sad things he did. And that's that.
Yeah.
For Kira is just another regular day.
Truly.
Being the highest ranking Bajoran on Deep Space Nine.
It really is. Well, and it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning about how great it is that Sisko could just let her do her thing.
Yes.
Because I was actually kind of surprised that Odo sees him in the promenade, arrests him right away, because Odo was there during the occupation and is very aware of Bajoran politics. And then when he's in jail, Kira, like we were just talking about, visits him, and she has no problem citing all of the regulations about why he needs to stay there and why he's exiled from Bajor. So I just thought, like, how lucky is Deep Space Nine, you know, to have someone who's so like knowledgeable about all this stuff, and she's just unyielding, you know. And yeah, I mean, I think if the episode were to go on and we find out more stuff about Kublis, like, that would be something else. But I don't know, it's just a very interesting way to start this whole episode out.
You know, we have not covered Duet, which is probably the most famous episode about this this issue. But I think that it's sort of delicious that, having seen Kira's ability to change her mind in Duet, we also see that she can also just go on unyieldingly when she knows she's right.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's, you know, never making Kira too nice or mushy was a major victory for the character, I think.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Nana Visitor, a large part of the reason why. She was very open with what she thought Kira would and would not do.
I love that about her. Absolutely. Yeah. Like, not gonna let her fold on certain situations where she clearly wouldn't. Like, Kira has always been one of the coolest, like, pillars of strength, you know, especially for a place like Deep Space Nine where they really need her. She's just the perfect person for it.
Well, and I enjoy how in the beginning of the episode, when it shows Bareil and Kira together, they're like post-coital, or just like waking up together, you know, having a nice morning. Despite how, like, lovely and wonderful a time they're having, Bareil teases, like, you are going to vote for me, right? And she like, yeah, she's going to vote for him, but she still, like, reminds him, like, I don't agree with you on everything.
Yeah,
so
I love
better
that.
watch out, you know?
That is one of my favorite character moments of all time, because it's like, you know, they are about as intimate as you can get. But, you know, I don't like this one or two position you have on such and such.
Yeah, exactly.
I did hear your Kira episode, by the way. It's excellent.
Thank you.
Did you find anything surprising when you sort of looked at Kira in full?
I think it was interesting, her reaction to Bareil dropping out at the end. She really goes off on him and says, you did not need to withdraw. You're letting Wynn get the power. But even when he tells her, I was covering for Kaiopaka, and she, you know, she has all the pieces together, but I really liked that she was still going to be like, no, you still deserve to be the Kai, and you still deserve this position, and that, like, she was really kind of reminding him of his worth, just not based on Opaka and not based on, like, what he's doing to protect. And he did become a martyr for this, you know, and I think that she's pissed off at that. And I really like this about her, that even after it all is pretty much said and done, and Wynn has become Kai and it's terrible and everyone's just sort of like, oh great, here we go, I really like that Kira is still fighting for Bareil and still trying to understand his point of view, even though, yeah, like you said, Carl, that she can have a lot of, like, black and white thinking. I love that she's still able to come around and understand his position and question him on it. It's just so cool. The duality of Kira is amazing.
Yes.
I think for me, we didn't really cover it in our First Officer series, but just, like, knowing Kira as a character, she, you know, we talked about how collaborators are really, like, the worst thing you can be. And in the episode, I think it's, oh God, is it Wrong Starker than
Death or
Wrong
Night?
Starker than Death or Night. Wrong Starker than Death or Night, I think, is probably a more successful version of what this is sort of trying to do with Kubis Oak. Just a tangent on Kubis. I lived in Massachusetts for about 20 years. I swear that was a Massachusetts accent Kubis had.
Yes.
And not only that, I feel like he looks a lot like Ted Kennedy looked in the 90s.
Yes, I was thinking that.
It's wild.
Did you get Kennedy vibes off?
Yeah.
And like I don't think they meant anything by it except maybe it's like delicious let's play with people's buttons here. But like this is definitely a generation of TV writers that worshiped the Kennedys. And he was kind of the last remaining scion at the time.
Right.
And if they did do it on purpose to have a dark joke, it's funny.
I love that. Yeah.
Really.
I thought it was
Totally.
so sketchy that they asked Quark to break into the Bajoran. Was it like the console?
Assembly.
Yeah. I thought that was sketchy. And Quark even says, like, I want you to sign that I will not be framed for this. Because that's what I was thinking. Like, they're just using Quark. I feel like the Quark-Odo relationship is, like, so interesting that it could happen, you know, where they could totally ping Quark for this, but it clearly was just like the writers need this to happen, so they're using Quark, and luckily nothing bad happens to him.
Yeah, he's the go-getter, like, kind of when you don't want something done on the books, like, gotta go to Quark.
For sure.
I believe with all my soul that if something went wrong, Odo would protect Quark in this instance.
I think
Yes,
so. Yeah.
The thing I love is that they do that instead of like going to Cisco and getting some kind of official permission as the emissary. Like
True.
which, like, if you think about it kind of rationally, like, what would you do? Should I authorize an illegal break-in? Or should I get my boss, who is literally the emissary to the prophets, to try to sanction this for me? Let's go with the illegal break-in.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like keeping this on the down low.
Yeah, I think she really wanted to keep it on the down low just to protect Bareil as much as possible, even as she's figuring out what she thinks is the truth before she learns the official truth, where, like, you know, I think that it's another way to protect him is to go through and use Quark.
I thought it was interesting when she talks to O'Brien, though, because he's a little bit more of an official channel, but he's still just like, he's a friend, you know, like he'll help Kira out.
He knows how wartime situations are, like he'll do it on the DL. Yeah,
I loved the technobabble in that scene too, because he was like, sometimes there's like the ghost of a file.
Yeah.
And I love when it like reveals the face of who like
Bareil,
deleted the data. And it's Bareil. Da, da, da.
We got nothing but his face.
Yeah.
Good thing you recognize him. Because his name was on it, actually.
Yeah.
And it's another example, too, of the sort of magic computer. Because I'm not sure Deep Space Nine really needs to have that list. It would have the transit records, sure. I don't know if it needs to have battlefield records that would tell you what Resistance fighters were where. They have a lot of memory space up at Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's the cloud.
Yeah.
The cloud is working well.
Yeah, the Cardassians did not delete the cloud before they left, luckily.
The Cardassians probably don't know how to use the cloud.
Yeah,
For the
probably not.
Bajorans, we're using it under.
Yes.
Well, I just want to do one last Kai Wynn line. Imagine you're Cisco. You know, Wynn has been opposing you and sort of disrespecting you in small ways for months at this point. And she comes up and she says, some people are saying that our relationship is not all it could be. And Cisco's like, oh, really? Where do you think they got that idea? Like, I'm not going to be the one who breaks this shit. You are going to have to be the one.
Yes, I love that. He like pins her in a corner almost.
Well,
You're doing the emotional labor here, not me.
Exactly.
And I love like the outcome, the very end, you know, she's supposed to be meeting with Cisco and like having that face-to-face for publicity. And then when she's elected Kai, she's like, to Kira, she's like, tell Cisco I'll have to like postpone our meeting. And I'm like, yeah, of course she was going to cancel that, you know, because it was
like,
never genuine. Yeah.
That was beautiful. You know, I get the Dolores Umbridge comparison, but I'll also tell you this. She is a lot smarter than Dolores Umbridge.
Yes, definitely.
And part of what makes her smart is she is very good at diplomacy. You know, they had that argument about whether Prophet's love is unconditional. And she replies, she's like, well, thank you for telling me how easily prophecies can be misinterpreted.
Yes.
And like, that's shady, but if you happen to disagree with Bareil and agree with her, you would think that was awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you know,
totally.
that is not a terrible way to sort of disarm a controversial issue.
I mean, I it's like respect, you know, or it's like I respect her response, you know, like I don't agree with her at all, but damn, that was a great response.
Yeah.
And when Kira comes in and basically says, without saying so, I'm going to use the bureaucracy of Deep Space Nine to stop you.
Yes.
And she has to stop and recalibrate. And it's like, game recognized game.
Exactly.
That's how they...
Yep.
That was the phrase I was looking for. Exactly. Right.
Yes. There it is.
Yes.
You know, sometimes people will not respect you until you show them that you can stop them if you don't answer their concerns.
Yeah.
And Kira knows this well.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Colonial Day, Battlestar Galactica. It's an important day for civic life in the fleet, as elections are held for the Colonial Legislature, the Quorum of 12. But that means dealing with Tom Zarek, who has been elected member for Sagittarian. Zarek is an intellectual with a history of political violence, who almost set off a prison riot in the Bastille Day episode. His first act, to call for the election of a vice president. His second act, to run for vice president. Apollo is worried that if Zarek is elected, he would assassinate Roslin. His worries are confirmed when he and Starbuck interrogate a couple of violent, heavily armed Zarek supporters who have been stalking her. Later, they find that one of them, Valance, is dead, killed, they assume, by Zarek's organization. Roslin's side needs to pick an opposing candidate, and she knows who it has to be, Gaius Baltar. In the event, Baltar halts Zarek's rise, deadlocking the quorum on a 6-6 vote, but allowing Roslin to cast the deciding vote Kamala Harris style.
Yes.
Zarek concedes for the moment, but he wants Roslin to know something. I didn't kill Valance. I wonder who did. What did you think of Colonial Day?
This was such a cool episode as an introduction to Battlestar. Like, I really felt like I was learning a lot about the characters. I was even texting Ashlyn afterwards, like, wow, I'm really, like, enjoying the characters already. I'm very much a person who watches the show for the characters, and so I, of course, love a good plot, but it's really fun to see them all interacting, and I thought this was just, like, rich with so much going on. I was literally, like, taking notes almost nonstop the entire episode. Like, there's so much exposition and then so much that happens during. I thought it was just a really great way to sort of lay down the politics in this universe and to just sort of show how similar, you know, it's very much reflecting American politics and just sort of the way that politicians are able to manipulate and utilize their power to try to stay on top.
Yeah, I agree with Rhianna. I feel the same. I also just really enjoyed the portrayal of the media in this episode because I think it adds so many layers to the politics. I was particularly intrigued with Ellen. Yeah, I was intrigued by her interaction with Zarek in this episode because she's seen at the beginning she chooses to shake his hand even though he's this literal terrorist, and the whole, I think, public opinion is going to be formed of Zarek depending on how all of these other really important politicians react to him. So I just enjoyed seeing that and how it added such complexity to this episode, and also just kind of trying to play the guessing game of what is everybody's motives going on, what's going on with Gaius. You know, he doesn't even want to be there, and yet here he is having a really nice time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I also loved getting to know Roslin as the president, and yeah, I really liked Colonial Day.
This was one of my favorite episodes in the Oddies, partly because the original Battlestar Galactica was not interested in democratic government at all. What Ronald D. Moore brought to this show in part was, we need to see the civilian life. If you are in this dramatic of a situation where the Cylons have killed about 99% of humanity, you are 2 months out from a massacre of that level, you are the last human beings left. How do you do democracy on that level? It's easy to think of The West Wing, of course.
Totally.
Were you fans of that show?
Yes, I love The West Wing. I was actually thinking about it during these two very political episodes.
Something's been bugging me about this. Last week on our show, we had comedians Tamara Brown and Asterios Kokkinos. An excellent interview. But one of the things that Asterios says is that the politics doesn't hold up for him because he feels like there would be no hope. It would just be a military dictatorship. I think so much of this comes down to who Adama and Roslin are. And obviously you see very little of Adama this episode, and that's on purpose. This is Roslin's hour. Roslin, who was not prepared for the presidency but was thrust into it, she is being the straight A student, I think. And she is kind of using her influence to sort of re-induct people into the democracy. And that's a beautiful thing. You know, I've never been closer to like living under dictatorship than what that 4 years of Donald Trump felt like for me. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people of a lot of different political persuasions worked really hard to keep the separation of powers so that we could come out of that. And we're still in it, of course. But I'm going to come out on this podcast. I am pro-democracy. And I don't care how many listeners this loses me. And I do believe that democracy would survive if someone like Laura Roslin happened to be at the head of it. Roslin has a lot of credibility and love among the fleet. She is the one who sort of saved them. You know, she gathered them together and put them under the protection of Galactica. So they owe her big. Even if they don't really want democracy, I feel like they would follow democracy because she said so. Mm. And then, as always happens, the other politicians rise. The other thing that I think means democracy survives is this show was heavily influenced by 9/11, but I really think the day-to-day of living in a cramped bunch of ships like this would be more like living through the pandemic was. Mm-hmm. Your world just becomes very, very small, mm-hmm. and you get really, really irritated at your neighbors.
Yeah.
Hence, democracy.
I thought it was really interesting to see everything that Zarek has to say when he's criticizing her. He's saying things like, why did this man next to me in the garden, like, come to work today? Because he has a job, like, because he wants money. Like, mm-hmm. There's no, like, people don't have, like, if they don't have any work to do, like, basically all our dreams are dead. Like, Roslin's vision of the future is, like, restoring the old ways, and my way is, like, actually giving meaning to things. And I feel like the place where we're at now in a post-Trump world, even pre-Trump, we're all looking for that thing to, like, make us feel alive, you know, and mm-hmm. that, like, we're not in this, like, crazy society that we're in. And so, like, as much as Zarek is, like, clearly a bad character and, like, a dangerous character, what he's saying is, like, yeah, sure, it would be nice to reinvent the wheel, but you can say that, so how are you going to do it, you know? And so I do have a lot of respect for Roslin, too, because she's clearly just, like, keeping everything together, and she's totally blindsided by his call for the vice presidency. And even what you said about, like, the military dictatorship, that's what one of the characters says, too, is, like, if you were to die, like, mm-hmm. we would descend right into a military dictatorship, so... Yeah. How is this future going to play out? So I thought really the comparisons between the two of them that they each make is really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciated seeing these different political ploys they would both make, you know, in order to try to get the power. And I think particularly what Roslin said about Zarek is that he's charismatic and knows what buttons to push. And I was instantly thinking about Kai Wynn, you know, like this is so similar, you know, like that charisma can get you so far. And also I love one of the points of the episode, I can't remember who says it, but they're like, oh yeah, well now he started to make promises, so more people are going to vote for him. And that's exactly what Trump did, made a lot of empty promises. Mm-hmm. And like, I think it really is showing the depths of politics and how much like it's how conniving it is and how sneaky people can get on both sides. But I love to see that Roslin didn't sort of bow down to that, you know, just stayed steadfast and like, no, he is not going to give you the future that he promises, and it's just going to make everything worse. And I love that, like, you know, I can't elect this other person as my vice president. Let's get this, like, other charismatic person that everyone loves to get that vote done. You know, sometimes you have to play back dirty in order to make things happen in politics.
What'd you think of old Wallace Gray, the fatuous gas bag?
I honestly forgot. Wallace. I forgot his name until the end of the episode, so I
forget his name on an hourly basis.
Yeah, I was only remembering him as the gas bag, and I was like, oh, that's the gas bag. Okay. Yeah, I did feel bad for him because he's so easily replaced by Roslin, and that position of VP is just to be someone who's going to agree with her and be on her side, you know? And so when it's clear that the vote is probably going to fail with Gray, it turns to Gaius. And I love that scene in the bathroom that she has, like that conversation, because she's first checking with her security, like, is it clear? Clearly they don't do a good enough job because there's that that other
definitely
woman.
No reporters here.
Yeah, exactly. And so once the conversation is done, Gaius is like, damn, okay, I'm gonna be the VP, and he's like, let me give you an exclusive. I just thought that whole thing was brilliant, you know, like I'm just thinking about the reporter, you know, her perspective is like, oh my, holy shit, like what is happening?
I feel like Wallace Gray, you know, they attack him. They say he's the yes man. I feel like he comes off more as her chief of staff.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I feel like he's the details guy.
Yes.
When they bring up the possibility of him running, he's like, oh, I'm not a politician. A lot of politics is about figuring out ways, I think, to ask people questions where they can't say no to you. Mm-hmm. And I think you watch Mary McDonnell in that scene. She gets up real close, looks him in the eye, you know, Tom, I need you. And, you know, this is someone who's sweated with her day in, day out. But then shortly after that, it becomes, Tom, I need you to withdraw so this asshole can come in and take your job. And he says, despite not having to wanting to run in the first place, he's offended. He's like, man, I thought you weren't a backstabber. I guess you're a backstabber. I didn't want to be vice president, but now that I've tried and you don't like what I've done, this sucks.
Yeah, exactly. Like, for a job I didn't even want in the first place, you're kicking me off of, like, really? Yeah, that's extra. I'd be extra sore as well, for sure.
I really thought that they were setting him up for something the way that she said, or when he says, I'm not a politician, because what we've seen so far of Zarek at that time in the episode is that he's also not a politician. You know, he's someone who's like making like really bold statements, extremely bold. And so I feel like you would want someone on the other side who's also not a politician who can come out and like really be striking. But that's not great.
No. One thing I'd like to ask people who haven't seen Battlestar before is Baltar and number 6, the invisible Cylon who makes out with him. How in God's name did that strike you?
Well, I think I've seen so much Trek, you know, where there is some sort of entity that's inside someone's head and they can only see them. And I was like, okay, yeah, par for the course for sci-fi.
Right.
Like, that part didn't bother me, but I was really stricken by how Six was literally, like, raising his hand to, like, agree to even be there, to have a vice president in that setting. And then, like, it just shows how much he's being manipulated. I just think it's a really cool angle to take, but definitely terrifying. I'm like, she's pretty powerful. I think she could do whatever she wants to him, and he would just like go along with it.
Yeah, I was rolling with it too. I was like, okay, sure, there's a lady here that no one else can see. That sounds about right. But similarly, like this, like Gaius seems really easily manipulated by her, and he's supposed to be this genius, you know, like scientist, and yet he's so easily swayed by women and like partying. It seems like that he's not thinking very deeply about why he rose his hand to second the VP.
Yeah, because he's giving me like early Julian Bashir vibes.
Very much, yeah.
Yeah. For some reason, I kept getting like Firefly vibes from this show too.
What reminded you of Firefly?
I don't know, just like the kind of I don't know, like I think River, especially like how like unhinged River is in Firefly, and also just that like you're trying to figure out like what's going on in the government too with Firefly, because that's like they're rebelling against the predominant government. I don't know, just some like I don't know, something about it just really reminded me of it.
I feel like Battlestar sort of perfected and became known for a lot of things Firefly tried out. Maybe most notably the handheld camera aesthetic. Gaius Baltar says, any man who uses his intelligence to blow up a government building does not get my vote. However, before the Cylons attacked, Gaius Baltar was compromised, and he was used so that Cylon agents could infiltrate the defense mainframe, shut down the entire planetary defenses, and make the Cylons pick Caprica up easily. And
Yikes.
Oh yeah.
the thing I love about his journey into electoral politics, which he hates, let's not forget, the one reason he wants to do it is because he wants to be on TV. That's the only reason.
Yep.
Did you love the scene in Roslin's office where she is listening to him defend her, and like her face is like completely cold. There's almost no expression, but like we know, because we're listening to this and we're listening to the other guys. Like we know she's coming to the decision to draft Baltar.
Yeah, totally.
I thought that scene was really powerful because that is ultimately like that's the nail, in the coffin. She's like, "Yep, okay, cool." And
Yep.
I even thought like he's speaking really well right now. He's the type of person, no matter what is going on in his head or like in his background, he can give a good speech when he needs to. And I feel like in this world, that's really important. He's saying really kind of damning things about Zarek, and I thought it was really striking, actually. Like, I was like, okay, this guy's clearly, like, maybe not a good choice, but based off of this speech, like, that is awesome, like, everything that he's saying.
And wasn't it like, oh, finally, someone's helping Roslin who knows the score.
Yes,
Exactly.
There's kind of established order on how to do, like, political questions, and Gaius just nails it. Like, step one, answer the question in a way that, like, stays on message, Roslin, a school teacher. Step two, attack your opponent. Tom Zarek doesn't know about that. Well, how could he? He's been in prison. Step three, bring us together around your core values. We are going to fight this by being who we are: liberty, opportunity, democracy. A lot of people say like charisma is all or nothing in politics, but a lot of it is also like respect for the formula and respect for the ways in which people take in issues and willingness to engage on that level.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so well said. And I think too, it's also respect for words and rhetoric, and like how, exactly like you were saying, Ashlyn, like how important just speeches are in general in politics, but also like how words can be manipulated and used. We see it all the time with like sound bites and stuff, and it's similar in this episode where we have Zarek spitting a lot of magical words that is getting people enticed, and then we have Gaius on the other end like really trying to sort of do the same thing. It's so interesting to watch.
Yeah, I'm glad that guys pointed out about Tom's like prison history.
Yeah, like, come
Because-
on. Yeah.
Yeah,
That-
finally get on the prison stuff.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
that has not really been talked about except at the beginning of the episode. And like even when Zarek is like going down the line, when the like summit is first happening, when the quorum is first gathering and he's shaking everybody's hands, like once like Roslin, well, first it's Ellen shakes his hand and then Roslin shakes his hand, and I think even Ellen says like everyone knows he's gonna be like everyone has to start paying attention to Zarek now, like you're a fool if you don't, something like that. And so it was really strong of Gaius to just like, oh, just a reminder, like he was in prison. Like I know everyone's like swept up in this like emotion of like, whoa, Zarek could be VP right now, but let's remember the facts. And I thought that was a really good like grounding moment in this part of the episode.
Totally. Yeah, and to show like, I think it was also really well done to show sort of how far people who like supporters will go sometimes, and of course we have these two bringing in weapons into the summit and all of that. And so I thought that the way that they were able to build tension in this episode, and especially with Starbuck and Apollo like sort of being the one, the eyes and the ears, trying to figure out if there's going to be any danger to Roslin, like I really love the fact that we were able to like see this tension build and see that, okay, there are followers of him, and then of course when it all sort of comes to head when like Apollo is drinking and listening to the broadcast and is like, turn that shit off, essentially, and the followers get all intense about it, and then the fight breaks out. And so I thought that was like such a good show of like how committed and terrifying followers of a really prominent and charismatic politician can be.
What's interesting to me is I don't really find Tom Zarek all that charismatic. But everyone says he's charismatic.
I can see him as sort of a slime bag because I like know him for, but I think also he does have a way with words that is able to, like, his whole thing about, well, we need a new way of thinking, we need to reconstruct our lives. It's promising enough that it gets people interested.
Yeah, that was the only scene for me too, when he's going on and on to the reporter about like how he would change things, where I was like, yeah, okay, I could see it. But otherwise, like, especially everything going on with Valence and the fact that he is like worried, you know, when Apollo says, "Oh, we have Valence, it's your move," or something like that.
You're next.
Exactly, you're next. Then I'm like, okay, this is some shady shit going on right here, you know.
Let's pivot off that then into Apollo. Like, how do you think he handles his job in this?
Oh my
cowboy diplomacy bunch.
To ask a loaded question. How much do you think Apollo sucks at his? No.
Yeah, I thought the whole interrogation scene with Valence was crazy. I thought that initially, like, Starbuck and Apollo were going for like good cop, bad cop type thing in the interrogation, but Apollo just goes crazy. Yeah. So unhinged. Yeah, especially like this, I'm your executioner, you know, like that's really hardcore.
Yeah, and when he takes the exact same bottle that the guy was going to use to shatter on his head and does it on his, I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Wild.
Like, I feel like Tom Cruise from Top Gun could walk in and say, hey, Lee, just chill. Just chill a little bit, okay?
Calm down. Yeah.
So true, yeah.
And then we see later, Roslin's like, we can't violate his civil liberties. So he was faking it, but then he goes by Zarek and he goes, we got Valence, you're next. Meaning, we arrested Valence, you're next. Then he goes back to Valence, and Valence is fucking dead.
Yeah, I was questioning for a second. I was like, did he kill Valence? Like, did he? And I was like, nah, I probably wouldn't go that far. But it was shocking, that reveal of his death. And I'm immediately, you know, my mind is going to Zarek. But it was just so... That whole situation was so dicey, like the treatment of prisoners, and Roslin's like, oh, we'll keep interrogating him. And I'm like, what are they going to do next? You know, like, how much are they going to escalate this? And yeah, it's just like uncomfortable to watch for sure, to see him kind of flying off the handle in that way.
This is kind of an out-of-pocket, like, not related reference, but we're preparing for our Chakotay First Officer series, and in Voyager, there's a scene where, like, the Maquis are misbehaving, and Chakotay punches one of his lieutenants because he's like, oh, you want to do something the Maquis way? Boom. This is the Maquis way. I'll punch you. And so I kind of felt like Apollo was operating from that perspective, too. He's like, oh, you love Zarek? Well, you know what Zarek loves is no fair trials and executions. So here you go. Like, this is what I'm threatening you with. Like, if you believe in this ideology, that's how you're going to be treated. And so I thought that was really interesting to see, albeit like so unhinged and so like there had to be some emotion fueling that. Like, I assumed it wasn't just his character, because we saw him having a great time running around on the fields earlier in the episode,
playing with the water. I
assumed he wasn't all bad, but he's definitely playing in those stakes.
It really has gone to his head how much he thinks that he let Zarek manipulate him in the Bastille Day episode. Like, he has definitely been, and I kind of wish they had dealt with this a little bit more in the text, but like, he has felt like, you know, this guy's a fraud. He's fooled me once. He's not going to fool me again. I'm going to be violent and irritating so that nobody fools me.
Overall, like, especially when he's giving his speech about his dream for the future and how he's going to crush Roslin's perception of society, it just seemed like someone who was like woefully ignorant of how hard it actually is to make change. And sure, he can blow up a building and like shock people, and you know, like, he's good for the media, and maybe, you know, this is my Trump influences, but I also feel like he doesn't really understand how hard it is to actually keep the cogs turning and keep the government going. So in that way, it would be hard for him maybe to make change. If he was actually like a good vice president and like learned the system, maybe that could happen. But overall, I still feel like it's just a bad idea.
That's fascinating to me, because I feel like this is an area where the character's sort of charisma-lessness kind of works for him. I would believe that he used to be like a half idealist, half like violent operator. And then over the years, the idealism rotted away. We have a guy who is saying things that are not very clear, but are very passionate, does not have much in the way of practical policy to improve problems. But the other thing we know about him is a lot of really violent guys like him, a lot of really heavily armed guys like Tom Zarek. And that's, I think you see that in every fascist like movement.
Totally.
And, you know, we can talk about America, but, you know, France has a far right party that's been successful, and Hungary's, a lot of Eastern Europe has seen this trouble. And it's a little startling, to be honest, because I know I used to watch this and go, oh, this is a good episode. It's kind of like The West Wing. And now I watch it and go, oh, this is a good episode. It's kind of like January 6th.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it's kind of like the
terrifies
past
me.
couple years.
Yeah, that's so true. Oof.
I like a lot of the editing in this show, too. When she reads the last vote, that it's tied, they cut away at that point.
Yes.
Yeah, that was cool.
Like, you have everything you need to know. You know, the rest is just sausage making. Let's go party.
Exactly.
I love that. I love shows that can really streamline, because they already told you a couple minutes before, if it's a tie, then the president gets to choose. And so, you know, like, they've already told you what's going to happen. And so I love that they don't waste time, and it just cuts to the euphoria, you know, of like, yes, go Roslin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talked earlier about Ellen, and like something I would never do is take a drink from Tom Zarek. Like, no way, you're kidding me? Like, that just seemed so dangerous to like just sit down and have a drink and talk with him. But it made for a really interesting scene, you know, where we get to see these two people playing off each other, and like, yeah, it was just really fascinating. But I was like, nah, I would never take a drink from that man. Like, no, thank you.
Oh no, I mean, if I were Ellen, which I'm not at all, but like I would, because like clearly he is interested in her. He's making a point to talk to her, because they had a very interesting interaction at the beginning of the episode, and I think he's like curious about how will this continue to go. Like, let's form an alliance in this crazy government, you know?
Yeah.
He's following the rule of, if you want to get close to powerful people, get close to their spouses.
Yes.
Yeah,
Very
good
smart.
point. Her appearance is so different than how, like, I don't know, she gets to the perception of like, oh, I'm just the blonde wife, like just the side piece, and then you actually get to hear her speak, and like she gets to have this whole complex character, which I, number one, really enjoy, and two, I think it adds to Zarek's just overall characterization and how he's then going to interact with her and stuff. And I think it makes for interesting television when you have like people within you think are within like the party line that you're like rooting for, but then she sort of steps across it and creates her own narrative there. That was super interesting.
I also kind of thought it was a message to Zarek saying, I am not completely aligned with my husband on all issues, and so we can form a connection. Or like, if you know, want to take this further in like a political way, or I don't know, another way, like I'm down for it, you know? Like, she's not about her husband's interest necessarily.
I'm trying to figure out what exactly they were trying to imply by her last scene, which I think is almost the last scene of the episode. But like, she's like, hey, I got us a perk if you can get away from slave driving Bill. And then she sort of winks and nods to Zarek. Are they implying she killed Valance? Like, she can't have killed Valance.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, like, I'm just coming in here. I'm like, who killed Valance? And obviously, she was the leak. You know, they're trying to figure out who knew where Valance was, and it was only the first officer, like everyone in that room. Or I think it was two officers and then everyone in that room. But they didn't even think about the spouses. So Ellen is the leak.
Yeah.
Something crazy is going on there.
That's good.
Yeah,
I
Ashlyn's
like that.
fully convinced in the Ellen conspiracy here.
I low key love her though. I'm like, okay, girl, like I see you doing your thing, being super weird,
making
and
those
shady.
moves.
Yeah, climbing that ladder.
She's owning it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tom Zarek claims, I didn't kill Valance. I wonder who did. Is he telling the truth?
I think so. I think that, I mean, I don't know. I think that obviously it's not something you'd want to claim to be a part of, but I still think that maybe he has enough ego that he would have made more, or like wouldn't have just said outright like, oh, I didn't kill him. I don't know. I think that it felt like, okay, like I can believe that maybe this was something else at work here. Yeah.
Say he was lying. He would only make that lie if he thought Roslin didn't really know who killed them. It would be some kind of low-key psychological warfare if he did that. But if he's telling the truth, once he died, Apollo says, you're next. That's a death threat. All of a sudden, that's a death threat. Zarek now has reason to believe, if he really thinks this is a fascist dictatorship, he has reason to believe that they are out for him. But I'm so sure he's lying. Because he sucks. And he's always lying. I don't know.
I think it's Ellen.
I'm beginning to believe that more and more.
Honestly, I love this.
Honestly,
who knows what military spouses know,
Yeah, seriously. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he ordered his death, if maybe it wasn't him who, like, had the knife or had the glass on the wrist, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ordered it, but it was kind of a hidden lie, like, oh, I didn't do it,
That is kind of an example of kind of the difference in politics between, like, profound lies and expected lies. So if what you say is correct, he's like, I ordered his death, but I did not kill him. Compare that with Roslin, health reasons. Sure, why not? Health reasons.
Yes.
And that's an expected lie. But it's different from, I killed somebody and I won't take responsibility from it. The fact that Roslin brought the legislature together within 2 months of the Colonial disaster, I just have to say it proves she's not a fascist to me. I'm sure it's not. I swear it's never perfect, but like the fact that it is at least open enough that someone who hates her as much as Zarek could get in, that's a free election, I think.
Yeah. Also, the fact that, because I think when Apollo and Starbuck are like surveying the whole area and they're like doing their security workup, saying, oh, how can we even possibly protect Roslin? Like, there's going to be so many people here. That sets you up. Like, there's going to be a lot of civilians in this area watching this. And then later, when Zarek is like clearly causing problems, I think it's Apollo suggests like, well, why don't we just send everyone from his district away, which I think is like Sagittarion or something.
Sagittarion, yes.
Yeah, Sagittarion. And Roslyn's like, no, that's against their civil rights. Like, you can't do that.
Into his hands too, exactly.
Yeah,
what he
like
thinks. Yeah,
you can't do that. And so I really respected her for that, because I feel like a lot of people wouldn't have hesitated to be like, bye, there goes your supporters. And so I totally agree. Like, yeah, she's not a fascist. This is a free election. And she's so blindsided by the VP thing. Like, there's no way she's that corrupted.
She's doing a hard job quite well.
Yes.
Totally.
She looks great doing it, too.
Oh, my God, amazing.
Have you seen a lot of Mary McDonnell performances before, or is this your first?
I think it's my first. Rhianna and I were talking about how she kind of resembles, in Doctor Who...
Sarah Jane.
Yeah,
Sarah Jane. That's a very good point.
Yeah, and how... And Sarah Jane's also, like, I think a former teacher, or, like, I don't know. Yeah, so it really seemed like a similar character.
Made me sort of feel more at ease with her right away. Like, okay, I trust her to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Every successful politician has a way of making you feel like they see you, whether they do or not. I go back to what she says when she invites Baltar to join her. She's like, you're a very intelligent man. You're a very popular man. I would be fortunate to have your intelligence and your popularity by my side. And that's to talk about Kennedy again. That's like Kennedy wit. I could imagine Kennedy being like, I could imagine your popularity and your intelligence by my side. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and it's honest too. It's very upfront about her position, and I think that sets him at ease a bit to say like, okay, well, at least she's being truthful about why she needs me. Yeah.
I wish there were more episodes of Battlestar Galactica like this. I find that the fleet is very uncovered compared to the military and the religion. But at least we had Colonial Day. And at least we had The Collaborator from Deep Space Nine. So in your opinion, which episode is better? Who wins this week on the theme of politics and democracy?
Oh my gosh. These are such different episodes.
It's hard. It's always a tough one.
It's very hard. I think for me, even though I'm new to it, I really liked Colonial Day. I'm someone who is like obsessed with politics, and I thought this episode did such a great job. I already said it, but such a great job of like displaying all the different layers that happen, and especially in such a really tense situation like Colonial Day, where you have all of these delegates that are coming, or the quorum of 12, and the media, the civilians, the president, the VP. I thought it did a great job portraying all of them. And I think also because we've talked about it, like this time of politics, I'm constantly searching for some solace, some solidarity. And I thought this episode really gave it to me. And I thought Colonial Day really holds up.
Colonial Day. Rhianna.
I'm actually also going to go with Colonial Day here. I think
Whoa.
that...
Whoa!
Like, yeah, which is crazy because Deep Space Nine is like my favorite Star Trek show. But something about this episode, I think being a person who's barely knows anything about Battlestar Galactica to begin with, to be put in an episode in like, you know, further on into season 1 and to still be able to understand the characters enough and to enjoy the plot and really feel like I'm enriched by it, you know, after the end of the episode, it made me want more. And I think that that's exactly the formula of a successful episode, and especially because we get to have this amazing comparison and contrasting with Deep Space Nine. It really helped me to like, wow, like this is just such a rich show, and I can tell how much more it has to offer, and it just makes me really curious to see more. So I think that's one of the reasons it was a little bit more successful. And I'm always happy that there was like a victory here, wherein Kai Wynn becoming Kai is like terrifying. So it was nice to have a positive outcome in this episode.
I think this is only the second happy ending in Battlestar Galactica history. Last week was also a happy ending.
Nice. Solid.
But this is remarkable. Two Star Trek podcasters are opting for Battlestar.
Yeah,
I'm
wow.
impressed. I think we got to tell Ronald D. Moore. And,
seriously.
Yes.
Whoever Carla Robinson, I think, was the one who wrote this. When I started watching these, I was sort of planning to vote for Collaborator because I feel that while the story in Battlestar is more immediate, the Deep Space Nine episode kind of put more work into seeing what a alien democracy would look like. I mean, not quite a democracy. I mean, you know, it's religion, but you know, within its narrow purview. With Colonial Day, this is loaded with the switchbacks of kind of early '80s politics. It was kind of remarkable, I thought, on Deep Space how there's a lot of religious power, a lot of which is exercised by women. You know, the fact that Kai Wynn's outfit, it kind of looks like a combination of like the Puritans and like the Handmaid's Tale is kind of remarkable to me.
Yeah, true.
But when you get right down to it, I don't think the story is quite as exciting. And I don't think it puts the stakes into democracy the way Colonial Day was. So I agree with you, and Battlestar Galactica is the winner today.
Wow. That's amazing.
Thank you so much for being on this show. I appreciate it very much. What is it, the will of the prophets, that you should plug right now?
Ashlyn, would you like to?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We even have a TikTok, which is mostly run by Rhianna, and it's fantastic. We have a Tumblr. We have merch on Threadless. We are known as the Duras Sisters podcast. You can find us pretty much anywhere, wherever podcasts are found. Thank you so much for having us today. This has been so much fun to do these deep dives. That's our specialty, is deep dives. So it's really fantastic to be on your pod and to be able to talk deeply with you about these fantastic characters and episodes.
We really appreciate it. Yeah.
Tune in next week when we will cover Deep Space Nine's episode Destiny and Battlestar Galactica's episode Kobol's Last Gleaming Part 1 on the theme of prophecy. I'm Carl, and good night.